Welcome to the Advantage Podcast, a monthly unscripted conversation with host David Ashcraft and top leaders impacting our world. Created by pastors, for pastors, to strengthen our leadership and expand our knowledge and influence.
Well, hey guys, welcome to the Advantage Podcast. And my guest today is Mark Grunden. Mark, thank you for joining us and taking time with us today. Appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. It's a joy to be a part of this. I've heard about the Advantage and really the powerful impact that you guys are making there in Pennsylvania and beyond. And it's a joy to be with you guys today.
That's great. So, Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself. Part of what you're doing now is working with faith-driven entrepreneurs. And so I'll ask you maybe to tell a little bit about that organization, but let's dig into your past a little bit. And I think you told me before the call that you've been with Faith Driven for about a year now, but what were you doing previous to this, and what's your connection to pastors?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about myself. Before we get started, I really want to encourage the vision and the work that's happening here with the Advantage. I saw on the website, you guys had this really powerful video, and it talks about Pennsylvania is home to 12.9 million people who God deeply cares about. And then it said, what if the gospel teaching pastors of Pennsylvania saw each other as collaborators rather than competitors? And it continues to go on. If I recall, it said, over 200 years ago, Pennsylvania was the birthplace of a nation. And what would happen if today it could be the place of rebirth for our faith in our nation? And I just want to encourage that vision that you and the team have, because revival is happening. Although we pray, a lot of us that pray for revival, pray for this, sweeping move of God's Spirit to come across our nation. And what I see happening is in pockets of awakenings that are occurring within the communities and the context of our local churches. It was the case serving on staff as a pastor at Saddleback, and now here at Faith Driven, we just are seeing these pockets of awakening that are happening. And so whether that's seedbeds of something greater that is happening, or whether this is this movement and these awakenings are actually what God's spirit of revival will look like in this generation, I don't know. But there's something there to steward. And the gathering and the encouraging of pastors here at the Advantage, I think is critical to that, because it helps us stay in the game, to stay focused, and then to have the encouraging voices to help us identify opportunities that are emerging. And so I just want to commend you and the team for the work that you're doing and the faithfulness in it. I think it's truly, truly important. So,
hey, fun to hear you say that, Mark. We just were together with about 40 to 50 of our Pennsylvania pastors and some of the cohorts. And pretty much to a person, they're all saying the same thing that you are, that there is something happening right now. And so whether it's revival or whatever it is, God's definitely moving, and everybody's sensing it and feeling it in their churches. So,
that's so good. That's so good. Well, that's affirming to hear, because we're seeing it.
Exactly.
Well, for myself, I've spent most of my life right at the intersection of business and ministry. My first job out of college was working in a church plant as a youth pastor in Las Vegas, Nevada. And then the Lord took me from there and moved me into business, where I led marketing and business development teams across Asia and here in the US, and then ultimately running my own company. Funny enough, the story is my wife, she wanted to marry a pastor. And so when we were engaged, I was a pastor. And then by the time we got married, I was in business and ultimately ran my own company. And then there's at one point when I started my business, she says, Mark, are we ever going to get back to that, that dream that we had to be in, vocational ministry together? And we were always serving in the church. We're always fully engaged. But I said, I just need a couple of years to get through this. God has something to teach me, and I don't know what it is, but I want to lean in on it. She's like, okay. Well, finally, when I worked through that, achieved the things that I wanted to learn and accomplish through that business, then we ended up moving to Southern California to join staff with Saddleback Church, where I stewarded and helped expand a number of different ministries while I was there. So
I think I saw small groups you were doing for a while, missions you've done. So
So a couple of things that we did there, and was able to work with this. Really gave a lot of leadership to our small group team, and in that was really saw the dynamic nature of what it looks like when communities come together. And one of those that I saw emerging out of that was really the language communities that were happening in Southern California. We had directly across the street, we had new communities that were being built, and 50% of them were Chinese nationals that were moving in. And the mainstream service of our church wasn't really geared to fit that context of non-English speakers to join. And I just cast the vision to those Chinese speaking small groups. What would it look like if we could gather people together And out of a low-resourced, fully volunteer team, that in 18 months we moved from a gathering of 30 to 60 people to then what became the largest Chinese-speaking congregation in Orange County, California. It was
That's
amazing,
cool.
over 400 people.
That's
We did
cool.
it again with the Persian community, again, out of our small groups, identifying something there. And so there's, again, these pockets of awakening that are happening. And then again, with the workplace ministry and the marketplace ministry there at our church, it was really started formed out of small groups. And then we began to recognize that God is on the move in corporate America. And we then developed a network and helping resource what God was doing inside companies, and developed a network of 7,200 people. Like, it was amazing to see what God was doing. And so those are just a few of the things that I've been able to be a part of there at Saddleback.
Yeah, that's fine. And so the 7,000 people, were those people that were all out of Saddleback for the most part? Or?
Yeah, if the leaders of these faith communities in these large corporations were members of Saddleback, and
Yeah,
they,
good.
as part of their ministry, that they were leading faith communities, and some of these were as large as mega churches themselves. Like, one company had 3,200 people that were a part of that Christian club that was
That's
there.
cool.
These were all things that kind of started in the last 5 years. Some just really interesting cultural dynamics and policies that were emerging in companies that allowed Christians to meet and gather, and God began to move through those.
Yeah, very cool. So not so much a bait and switch for your wife. You eventually have come back into the church, so she's
Yeah, yeah.
really fulfilled that way.
That's exactly right. And so, yeah, so we were able to move back into the church and just really spent, just really 7 dynamic years at Saddleback Church. And we are still there today. So although we moved out, and we can talk about that, but moved into Faith Driven Entrepreneur, the ministry here. It's still our home church of worship. Our kids are fully engaged, and it's just I still lead the workplace marketplace ministry at our church on a volunteer basis. So
Very cool. Unrelated to why we're talking, but how's Saddleback doing? Is it doing well? And I think there are a few churches in the country that everybody always wants to know, how is it doing? How's the transition gone with Rick stepping away? And so, is Saddleback healthy and doing well?
Hey, Pastor Andy Wood is a dynamic leader, and he is doing a tremendous job. I don't, who wants to follow, such
Yeah,
a dynamic and generational leader like Pastor Rick Warren? But Andy has done it. He is seeing the need that the new generation is feeling in terms of prayer and worship, and it's just really been faithful to walk out that calling here. We're growing, and there's some really exciting things that are happening. He's been able to stabilize a lot of things that have, through the transition, he's been able to navigate some really difficult conversations and times for our
well,
church in just 2.5 years. But he's been doing a tremendous job, and really commended for that.
good. That's encouraging. Yeah, like I said, there's several churches. Willow is one. I think Saddleback is one where I think everyone wins when those churches are strong and healthy and doing better. So fun to hear that.
Yeah.
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 So talk a little bit about what you're doing now then. You've transitioned from staff at Saddleback to faith-driven entrepreneur.
Yes. So let me take you back to the origin stories of that
Yeah,
meetup with them there. I was leading the marketplace ministry at Saddleback Church, and so Lausanne Congress of Global Missions is, we had their 4th gathering in 50 years. This was a congress, or like a gathering of pastors and mission leaders from around the world that gather, started by Billy Graham. And
right.
so there's 5,000 delegates that came together in Seoul, South Korea. I went there just because I heard that the marketplace ministry was going to have a significant track that was happening there. So I went there to learn like what's happening around the world in this space. And out of 5,000 people, the breakout session that was the most well attended, and it was attended by more than 50% of the delegates that were attending there, was the workplace ministry track. And so when I stood there in that room, I was just amazed by that, realizing the faith and work movement that's been happening for decades was finally becoming mainstream in local churches. Like, they were being introduced globally. And so it was an incredible experience for me to be a part of that. At the end of the week, it's like 7 days of like networking and absorbing all of these, these plenary sessions, just really incredible content. So I took an R&R day with a group of people, and we headed up to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone in South Korea, and Justin Foreman, the co-founder of Faith Driven,
Right.
on that trip. And so when we were there, we started talking a lot about what I was seeing happening, especially from the corporate, the corporate ministries that we were finding success in, and what they were finding success in with ministering to entrepreneurs. And it really became this trip to the DMZ became the first bro date for the two of us. And what we, on that time together, as we spent, nearly 2 hours just talking, was his heart to see faith driven not become like a parachurch ministry that is pulling people away from the local church and the ministry activities that are happening there. But how do we bring the ministry that's only been 5, 6 years old to become really a partner of the local church to help church pastors and local church leaders learn how to engage a high capacity leader in the entrepreneur that is oftentimes on the sidelines of their churches, but it could be one of the greatest collaborative partners to help a church be in the front lines of kingdom advancement in their community. And
Yeah.
so when I got that vision and conversations continued, it was just a perfect fit for me to move from a specific, although a dynamic church context, it was a specific context, to then how can we encourage churches overall to identify these untapped leaders that are in their congregations that can help them navigate really difficult challenges that we're up against in the local church in today's era, and then also see opportunities that are emerging and to be able to take advantage of those.
Yeah, that's cool. That was just a year ago because Lausanne, I had planned to go and did not go, so that wasn't long ago. That's cool that it's all that fresh for you.
Yeah,
Hey,
it was all that fresh. So we stepped there. Yeah, go ahead.
Mark, I was just going to say before you tell us about Faith Driven, so what you were doing at Saddleback and even what you're doing now with Faith Driven and what you just described. I mean, one of the challenges every pastor faces is what do you do with these people? They're high capacity people in the church. Sometimes it feels like all I have to offer for that high capacity person is to work in kid men or work in student ministry or be out in the parking lot or something like that. And so, because that feels like it's so beneath them, the tendency is not to ask them to do anything at all. And so, what did you do both at Saddleback? What are you recommending? How do I, as a pastor, even engage those type of people in my church?
No, that is a great question. And that is the normal experience. So that we have these individuals that come that are incredibly high capacity leaders, and oftentimes as like a pastor on staff, we're looking for people to help us move the ministry forward. We're looking for implementers, really. Can you do this? Can you do that? And for people to say yes to that. And so oftentimes when these business people are feeling God move in their heart and they're wanting to engage and wanting to serve God, they don't necessarily know that a lot of them see their business as a ministry, but maybe they haven't figured out how to do that. So they come to the church and they say, okay, I want to engage, I want to support. And usually one of the two things are passed to them, either a coffee cup for the hospitality ministry or a parking jacket to serve in parking.
Yeah.
And many of them find that is like, hey, that's a way just to disconnect with all the other challenges that I got, and I can serve here and be of use, and I'd love to do that. But really, the opportunity that I think churches have that we saw, especially at Saddleback, is engaging these high capacity business leaders as collaborative partners in our ministry, and engaging them. Ultimately, what is an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is somebody that is, we should probably define that too, as we have a lot of different connotations, but an entrepreneur is really a business owner. And they could be a tech professional that's leading a software company that's serving clients around the world, or a Main Street brick and mortar small family owned business. Those are entrepreneurs. And what they're doing there is they're identifying problems that exist, whether it's a service or a product, and they're coming in with a solution to those problems that they see. And they're taking risk. They're taking financial risk to step into that space to be able to serve. And most of these individuals are the best problem solvers that exist in the world. Like their whole job is dealing with problems and solving them. And so when we look at an entrepreneur or a business owner in that view, we see them as people that can help us overcome obstacles that we're up against. And they could be small or they could be big. And so from a small perspective, it could be, hey, we are wanting to engage with that coffee cup. Let's start there. With the coffee cup, we want to be able to create a hospitality environment that is welcoming, that is engaging, and we want to do it in a greater efficient way, or whatever the problems that we're up against, and then give that to an entrepreneur to help you solve with those problems. They're going to come alive and be able to feel like, oh, this is in my wheelhouse. I know how to be able to think through this, even if I might not have a coffee expertise in my background. Or to the flip side, to something bigger. We're really looking to engage our community in a more dynamic way. We don't necessarily know how to go about that, but we're open-minded. Is this something that you would like to engage to help us to be a thought partner in and to navigate and figure out how to accomplish a particular objective that we have? Or thirdly,
So,
my
well, go
last
ahead. Yeah.
is to ask them the question of, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? Because you're in a significant, you are in the community. Most of the people that are attending church, 80% of them they're already in. They're already walking the Christian faith, or at least have a desire to do so. But 90% or 80% of the people that are working in the companies of the people that are leading businesses are far from God. And so the questions to ask them is, what are you seeing out there that our church could potentially come alongside to support or get behind? And those types of questions will light them up and to increase their engagement. Yeah.
So as you're describing that, it's almost finding ways, how can they help us move further, faster as a church or as an organization? So that's one way to involve them. I'm imagining, and I want to talk about that further. I'm imagining, though, there's also then the outward focus of how can we help them impact their communities or their places of work, and so how can we come alongside them and actually be assistance to them too? But
Yeah. I think on that note, if I could just speak to that real
yeah,
fast, I think a lot of times we at the church, especially with the contemporary church today, it is the weekend is the draw, and then that is the catalyst to all the different, the discipleship journey and the different ministries that are there to support the people that are really they're walking in the front door of our church on a weekend. But if we see the entrepreneurs and business owners of our church as an extension of our leadership, they're the ambassadors that carry the influence of leadership in our community for our church. That becomes a dynamic role for us to extend our influence, not only just on who we're gathering, but the lives that we're impacting. And so if we're going for gospel reach, if we're looking for people that are coming to faith and that are being baptized and being discipled in their faith, like these are agents of change that are there at the front lines of people dealing with questions about marriage and faith. I think my last statement on this comment is, the same burdens that a pastor carries for the congregation and thinking about their spiritual and physical well-being, wanting their families to be healthy and whole, wanting them to have living productive lives, all that a pastor carries, that having connection with God and being walking in a life with Him, that same tone is what an entrepreneur and a business owner carries for the teams that they're leading. Like, of course, they want their families of the people that are working in their company to be thriving. If they have healthy families, they're going to have more attention and be able to give more to work. But it's not just transactional. It's like they're responsible for the paycheck that is being given to those individuals, and that carries a weight of responsibility for the livelihood of the families that are dependent on that income. And so that's that similar mindset. And so just know, as a pastor of working with these individuals, is they carry a lot of the same burden. And I think you have the ability to empathize with their role because you carry that as well.
Which is interesting because you've experienced it from both sides now. If you've been a pastor for the last 7 years or so, or were a pastor for 7 years, also in the business world. And so you definitely see a lot of overlap between the two.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, that's good. So let's get real basic, Mark, if we could. So you're saying that we've got these people in our churches that could be a huge asset to us if we're willing to engage them, maybe differently than what we've been engaging them in the past. How do I even identify them? And then how would a pastor get over maybe an intimidation factor of thinking, okay, here's somebody that is leading a company, a corporation, something bigger, maybe even than my church. And what do I have to possibly offer them? So that intimidation factor, but then even maybe a step further back than that is, how do I even identify those people?
That's great. I think it begins with understanding that the intimidation is on both sides, really.
Okay.
I think because pastors, especially here in the US, we've been professionally trained, our experience in the corporate world is typically or oftentimes very thin. And so there is this, I don't know how to engage. I'm really impressed with the size of companies that these people are building, the monetary wealth that they oftentimes can possess, or all of those things. So there's some intimidation for sure on the pastor side. But on the entrepreneur and business owner side, there is a lot of intimidation because there is this feeling of that the pastors are doing something that's really important for the kingdom. They're leading, they have tremendous influence over the lives, tremendous influence over their life. Like they look up to the spiritual leadership of the pastors that they that they submit themselves to. And so there is oftentimes an inadequacy. They operate sometimes in ethical shades of gray where there isn't a black and white, and they're dependent on trying to figure this out. Oftentimes they have to. So there's a lot of internal conflict, and there's a lot of desire to engage in the kingdom in a greater way, but don't feel like they necessarily have the time to do so. And so they oftentimes operate in this guilt complex. And so when they engage with a holy man as a pastor, there is this level of intimidation too, that I don't know if I stand up enough to what God is asking of my life, and I don't know how to navigate around that. So there is a great respect and interest that an entrepreneur and business owner has of the pastor of their church. So beginning with that, of recognizing, hey,
Yeah.
we have that same kind of perspective of each other.
And I'm not sure that, again, pastors always feel like and probably it's an inward thing. I doubt that the entrepreneurs or the business leaders are doing anything to cause them to feel this way, but I think oftentimes there's a sense of inadequacy. And so fun to hear that side of it, and probably one that I'm not sure we always consider or give thought to. So how did you go about identifying, and Saddleback is such a big church, how did you go about even identifying some of these people? Smaller church, you might just know them as friends, as people that are there every weekend, but what's the first step to even identify them?
Well, my recommendation is this is where a faith-driven entrepreneur creates some incredible tools that are free resources to the church. And there is nothing on the backside of faith-driven that we have to sell. I'll tell you that. The mission of faith-driven is to get entrepreneurs in the game of kingdom advancement. How do we get them off the sidelines and into the front lines? And so one of the greatest tools that we have for that is the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur Conference. I mean, oftentimes people come to our ministry because they're Googling or they're searching online saying, how do I become a Christian entrepreneur? Or what does it look like to have faith drive my company? And, then our organization, comes to them, and that's how they find us oftentimes. And so that's for our organization itself. But having kind of a center point of a gathering to talk about inspirational stories, to be able to cast a vision of what it looks like with successful business operators that are also driven by their faith and what that could mean for them. And so our conference is a 3-hour conference that happens once a year, and it happens typically in September. And it draws, it's a platform to inspire the entrepreneur. It's a conference for the Christian entrepreneur. And so that becomes a really great way to convene everyone together that has interest in the space. And then the second step is with our...
Mark, can I ask you then, convening people in that space? So as a pastor, I host that and I invite our business people and make it known that we're going to watch this together, take part in it together? Or?
Yeah, that's great clarifying. Thanks for that. I think our conference is not physically held anywhere. It's a digitally distributed 3-hour conference that is made for an online viewing audience that's gathering physically together. So churches would host this in their multi-purpose room or whatever conference room to be able to gather. It could be personal invites to those few friends, and it could be a gathering of 5 to 10 people, or it could be something greater just to see who out there is in the church that is entrepreneurial minded, and it could be a gathering of 30, 40, 50 people. So it really is set up to be able to scale with whatever context it looks like.
Yeah, good. And by doing that, then you, all of a sudden you've got 30 or 40 people in your room that maybe you didn't know before that are showing interest anyway in going further in this discussion.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And then what I think the heart of Advantage is, if I capture it correctly, is this idea that it's lonely at the top for senior pastors. And that there's a significant level of like isolation and loneliness that occurs. And the Advantage part of it, the purpose is to draw them together in a safe environment, to be able to have conversations that are meaningful and to resource them and to share ideas. And in the same spirit of that, Faith-Driven is intending to be that for Christian entrepreneurs and business owners. Is oftentimes they're carrying levels of responsibility that nobody else can imagine.
Oh.
And oftentimes it's difficult to go into a small group that they may be a part of as a couple small group and talk about business challenges because they have a $1 million proposition to be weighing, and it becomes very challenging. So out of that conference, a great next step that we provide is an 8-week small group study. And that is administered by a volunteer of the church. And then it walks them through really the 12 marks of a faith-driven entrepreneur. Really, like, you're inspired out of the conference, and then the small group study, it really gives people language and a framework to think about their business in terms of the kingdom impact. And a part of it, I won't go through the whole thing, but a couple of the thoughts that are part of that is, how do we find our identity in Christ? A lot of us like work and we feel that we're building this organization, and it's so easy to have our identity sucked up in that. But what does it mean to have our identity in Christ? What does it mean to move from ownership to stewardship? Everything I built is my effort, my energy, my risk. In fact, that whole personality that's prone to do that is God-given. The resources, the network, it's all God-given. So how do we have a mindset all the way to how do we remain engaged in the local church? So just a really, really great contact around there, very inspirational, story-based, and it's a great way to begin the conversation. Our intent at the end of that then is to allow a pastor to set the table for a pastor to sit with their entrepreneurs and then invite them into the vision of their church, whether it's a capital campaign or whether that's some problems that they're dealing with, or whether that is just the open invite of wanting to be in relationship and conversation with them and to explore how the Lord would lead it. We have some practical tools that people can utilize, but we're not prescriptive in terms of what that next step looks like for a church.
So part of what I like that you're talking about, Mark, is not being afraid to reach out to these people, engaging them. I like that there's a process that you guys have laid out. I mean, it's easy to invite somebody to a 3-hour conference and join that. I love that you've got the follow-up with the small group for them to interact, and then it kind of goes from there, which it's great to have that system. So pastors not trying to come up with and create their own thing, at least not right off the bat if they don't want to. So I love that. One of the things that I experienced here at LCBC, Mark, was a lot of the leaders, the highest capacity leaders, they didn't, several of them and real close friends of mine would say, we didn't join the church because we didn't want to be then susceptible to joining the board or committees if we're not church members. We want to serve, we want to help, we just don't want to get put on committees or boards all the time. And what I found is a lot of them don't have the time to serve maybe on a monthly or semi-monthly kind of board, but they love projects. And where I found the most success was pulling them into projects and saying, would you help us locate where we want to put the next campuses, or would you help us raise funds, or similar back to your point on even the coffee ministry, and help us build this out in a way that maybe we haven't built it before. So projects they love. Sitting on committees wasn't always something that appealed to them long term.
I think with entrepreneurs, they're very action oriented. And oftentimes businesses are seasonal, meaning like in the church, we have our Christmas and Easter are times that everything is zeroed in on those big events that are happening. And oftentimes businesses have the similar types of rhythms that are happening, which gives them times that they're completely offline. And then there's other times that they have more bandwidth to be able to engage. Yeah. And I think what you're saying there in terms of project-based ideas is great. First step in that is gathering and identifying who these people are to engage. And then it's kind of like, it's like layers in terms of from just general awareness of people through that conference to the small group studies and being able to engage with who these people are, to then ultimately, identifying the individuals that you could really call together to be able to ask to participate in a project like that. That's great.
So how did you deal with, Mark, both there at Saddleback and now with Faith Driven? And I haven't yet given you opportunity to describe Faith Driven, but we will get to that here in a minute. But how did you, one of my fears was always that, okay, I'm going to bring somebody in, they're going to have all kinds of great ideas, may not fit what we're trying to do as an organization, or sometimes I just worried, is it going to create all this much more work for me? It's like, I don't have the time, I don't have the capacity, the church doesn't have the capacity to take on the project that they're coming up with. So how did you or would you kind of temper that so that what they're coming up with truly is going to be a benefit to the church and not just like, oh no, now what do we do?
Yeah, that's really great, because that is that could create a large amount of hesitancy to engage idea people and action people. I think that what's important, has worked for me in my Saddleback ministry experiences is setting expectations in the context. Like, there is always limitations, and there isn't a complete, endless budget and endless time and endless opportunity. There are like limitations, and they're accustomed to those limitations all the time. They have limited budgets. They have limited time to be able to focus on things. So I think it's to set the expectation, especially on the front side of exploring this, is we're exploring something, and we love for you to help be a part of that ideation process. And so what we're exploring is this type of problem. Now, here's the thing. These are our limitations. limitation A, B, and C is something that we really can't negotiate around. And the problem that we have of accomplishing that is that we have these limitations that we're up against. And so we'd love to invite you, and if you know of anybody else, to help us think through that challenge that we're up against. And so I think oftentimes if we position it like that in terms of
that's good. I like that.
Exploring these are the limitations that we're up against, it really sets the stage for you to slow roll something if it's not the right season, or to be able to say, hey, this is a really great idea, but we have to pause on taking the next step in it because of whatever other priorities are happening in the church.
And it seems like usually the limits are going to be people, it's going to be time, it's going to be finances, probably priority, and prioritizing where it fits in the whole structure of the church and things like that. Yeah.
And I think if you were to be upfront about what those challenges are, they would be able to help with solutions around that. If it is in terms of bandwidth of individuals to execute some of the project deliverables or some of the things that need to be moved forward, they can help think through that. And if it's something that is they feel very passionate about, or very connected to, or have a level of emotional ownership over it, they may even say, hey, this is a project that we could raise funds for. And so what you often find, and as some other ministries that I'm connected with here in Orange County, when they engage entrepreneurs and business leaders, is not to lead with finances. And this is a funding that we need. I'm not suggesting you're saying this. This is in addition, additional thought but where engagement comes, the resources come to be able to support those things. And so not that we do that in a disingenuous way, like I want to engage them so that they can give, but not at all. But if we start with the idea of like, hey, we want to think through this, and one of the challenges that we have is financial to be able to get this up off the ground. That's one of the problems that I need to have solved in this particular ministry that we're hoping for. Can you guys help us think around those challenges that we're up against? They'll come with some great ideas to be able to help the organization and the church move forward.
Would you, Mark, hesitate to even initiate somebody right off the bat with that coffee ministry or the parking lot ministry? Or is that a proving ground to see? Or is that a false proving ground where they're like, yeah, I don't want to do that? Or do you find that that's a great way to test the small things? Or what was your thinking on that?
Yeah, I believe that and I can't speak for all churches, but for our experience at Saddleback is that there's always a proving ground. There's always a question mark, around character and integrity of an individual that we're just assuming like we're gonna believe the best and trust, but we need to verify that over time. And so there is value in a church context in the pace, which is typically slower than a corporate experience, much slower than a corporate experience, to slow roll some things so that commitment levels and integrity and the personality of how they approach things, it can all, and then we have nice off ramps. If it is not something that works, we don't want to be able to fire a volunteer, but to off ramp it in a really healthy way. So I think setting up those expectations in terms of exploring, or we want to pilot something, it always provides the opportunity for a pastor to back out and say, hey, this is really great, but there's some great potential, but we need to put a pause on this because of X, Y, Z opportunities that are happening, or as we just get settled, we just need to take a moment on this. I think being clear on timelines is helpful, and then as that provides some helpful expectations, and typically quick tempoed, very action oriented individuals.
I love the proving ground. I think there's a tendency in pastors, especially if they're scrambling, just trying to survive, and somebody comes along like yourself that has entrepreneurial background or skills, to just kind of latch onto you and say, hey, would you do this, lead that, and without truly proving you and making sure that you're somebody that's going to be able to last long term. And then all of a sudden, to your point, 6 months or maybe 6 weeks later, you're thinking, oh no, how do I fire or get rid of this person, which is tough to do as a volunteer. Plus then in the back of your head, you're going, if I get rid of them or ask them not to do what they're doing, am I also going to lose their finances in the process? So your mind gets jumbled with all these different things. Yeah, interesting.
The last comment on this is to think of it in project base. Think about it in terms of milestones. The first milestone is exploration. We gotta explore it, and then let's say it's a proven, like, this is a great idea, but we don't know if we have the energy as a church to go the distance of making this a permanent, fixed ministry. But then after exploration stage comes the pilot stage. We just want to try this out in a very small context. And in both of those, it gives the opportunity to say, hey, this was great, but we need to take a pause. Or this is great, and we need to reevaluate this in 6 months because of some things on the horizon that may be in competition or just might not be aligned. And so it gives both the pastor and the entrepreneur opportunities to opt out as they move forward.
Yeah, that's great. So, how, Mark, that's all us utilizing those entrepreneurs in our congregation. When we started talking earlier, you talked about maybe are there character, maybe that entrepreneur is concerned about their own character or decision or spiritual maturity. So, how do we pour into that person? Is there a unique, special way that we need to be addressing these individuals to really pour into their lives?
That's a great question. And so many entrepreneurs have operate with deep conviction for the organizations that they're leading. They are in it because they want to have a transformational impact in the people that they're engaging, whether that's the employees that they're leading or it's the customers that they're providing a service or a product for. And typically, especially if they're faith driven, they're a Christian business owner, they want their business to count. And so all that is necessary when you kind of like I would recommend you assume that they have great desire to be transformational in the work that they're doing. And that second assumption that is usually true is that they're up against a great weight of responsibility and they're fighting fires every day. And so recognizing that this is the individual that we're engaging is just to ask the question with curiosity, hey, tell me more about your business. Hey, tell me more about the biggest challenges that you're up against. I'm pretty unfamiliar with your line of work, but I'd love to learn more. That level of interest from a spiritual leader in their life to take interest in them personally will just fill them. They're individuals, again, they're operating pretty independently. And they're operating in isolation because they can't allow others to be in on the challenges that they're up against. And so by you just taking interest in that, it's a significant thing. If you're able to carve time once a month to be able to visit a business location of an individual in your church, to go there just to have a site visit. Hey, I'd love to come to your place. I've been meaning to get connected with you. I love, instead of going out for coffee or having a Zoom call or whatever it is, would it be able to stop by your company and just to be able to see what you have going on? That would mean the world to them. And then to take a moment just to pray the Lord's blessing and providence over that workplace, and to really affirm their commissioned role as a leader and as a minister to the people that are a part of that business, it would mean the world to them. It would mean the world to them.
And in some ways, Mark, that is so obvious because we all love for people to ask questions about our churches. We all love for people to ask questions about our ministry. And we love for people to take the time to come and look around. And so it ought to be obvious to us to do the same thing to the business people in our churches, but we tend not to. And so, yeah, real cool practical advice. I love that. And my experience in those kind of settings is they do love that. And they're so proud to be able to show their business and what they're doing and the difference they're making. So, yeah, that's cool. I love that.
That's great.
Any examples of situations at Saddleback where you kind of took people through those different stages that you were describing earlier of kind of evaluating and coming up with, here's what we'd propose to do, and then carrying an idea to fruition? Can you think of anything like that at Saddleback that they helped you in the church?
Yeah. I mean, all of, definitely so. The Mandarin or Chinese speaking community was,
you described earlier. Yeah.
that I described earlier, was a fully volunteer ministry. And it took entrepreneurs and business owners to be able to be a part of that leadership team to be able to help us navigate the challenges. Now, and so the question that was posed to them was, hey, how do we come alongside to engage this potential opportunity that I see happening, that the overall church is too busy to take notice. And so with no money and with no venue space, what can we do to be able to engage that? And the team came around that fully. Now we have a challenge. We have a challenge with interpretation or translation of all these things because these individuals speak zero English or very, very little. So how do we engage in that? And we were able to develop just a really robust ministry that had volunteer teams that were, 40 people we had translating our services overnight. This was before AI technology. And it was just a really robust team that was fully engaged. And so out of that, it really began with the entrepreneurial question of, hey, what can we do? These are our limitations, and how can we go about it?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What about the fear of somebody having a pet project? So, and I've experienced this at times with a few people at LCBC where they'll come, they've got a project they want. It's not one that you think fits into the church or where you're going as a church. And so, how do you deal with those people? Is there a way to still utilize them, or do you just have to say, you know what, good idea, but it just doesn't fit us right now?
Yeah, I think that is the challenge with every church. And I think with we went through a season at Saddleback where every member a minister, which we truly believe. And so with that, it's, if whatever we had also a tagline that says, "You're it." It's like, hey, I got this great idea. Well, guess what? You're it. God gave it to
Oh,
you. Let's just go see it happen. And then it usually comes with like, what kind of resources can we provide? Well, zero budget, zero venue space for you to use, and come up with a plan and then connect with me more about it. Or there may be times where our church has also gone through a season where we had to limit the number of opportunities and we had to become almost a seasons of consolidation because we were in times of staff reduction or a greater period of focus because we need all attention in a particular direction. And so it is really the gift or the skill of trying to redirect an individual, saying, hey, this is a great idea, but our attention for our ministry is on these priorities at this time. And so we'd love for you to, at this time, our church just can't come around that, but I want to encourage you for what God is putting in your heart. And I don't want to stop what God is doing. So if he's put this passionately in your heart, go do it. We just at this time are not able to support that as a church. So I think pastors need to have the freedom to be able to commission people and on their own time in their own way, and to have an independent initiative that they're growing. And at the same time, I think the fear of losing them or the fear of them not being fully engaged by the word of encouragement coming from a pastor to what God is putting on their heart is an incredibly endearing action. And so for a pastor just to take interest in what they're doing, to listen and then to encourage them, I don't think the church necessarily needs to support that fully in order to have that encouraging role in their life. And then
yeah, that's
lastly,
great.
you always have people that have crazy ideas that just don't fit, or you can tell that they have some sort of angle that they're trying to benefit from. And so I believe most churches are very good at figuring out how to root that out. And then secondly, how to oftentimes slow roll them where they just get frustrated and then they move away and
Yeah.
say, okay, there's got to be an easier way to accomplish my agenda that I want to do.
But I love, in essence, with each answer you've given, Mark, it's approach people with candor. It's just express what limitations are there. Just be truthful with them. Say, here are the limitations we've got, and so I'm happy to commission you to go do that somewhere else. Not somewhere else, but without the church's necessarily full backing. But I just that conversation of candor, I think, is real important. So I think we visited Saddleback one time, and it probably was 20 years ago at least now. And that was back in the day when if you had an idea, then you're it, you do it. And so there were hundreds of ministry opportunities out in the patio between services and all. Our kids were young at that time, and they were giving away donuts free. And so they labeled it the Donut Church and loved it because of the donuts. But I was just amazed at all the different ministries that were on exhibit there on that particular weekend anyway. So
Well, the donuts persist, even though many of the
they're
ministries
still there.
So yeah.
That's good. So I've kept you from talking about faith-driven entrepreneurs thus far, but describe it a little bit then, and again, how it can come alongside pastors and actually be a benefit in this whole whole
Yeah.
situation of trying to figure out how to work with entrepreneurs.
Well, the heart of faith-driven entrepreneurs is to get entrepreneurs in the game of kingdom advancement, to move them from the sidelines of their churches to the front lines of what God is doing. And what our heart is to see pastors to be able to engage those individuals well as collaborative ministry partners in their local church. That's our heart. And so everything we do is really intended to give pastors a lift, to make it easy for them to engage, a reason to talk about something, and to be able to give an invite to somebody so those conversations can take
Yeah,
place.
that's good.
That's really the heart of it behind us. We find The ministry began. I'll take 2 minutes to kind of give a background, but the ministry really began out of Henry Kastner, who is one of the co-founders of this ministry. And he was, if you we're speaking on Zoom right now, and his company that he started, Bandwidth, is the company that has really developed the technology for Google Voice and for platforms like Zoom to be able to do what we do. And but when he was building that company, he had this great desire to build his company in a faith-driven way, to have his Christian values really lead the organization. And he wanted to find like-minded investment to be able to invest in his company. So they had shared values. It felt impossible. And so he didn't find any investors that shared the similar values. So he built his own company, IPO'd it. And when he had a partial exit, he built a company he started a new company, an investment company called Sovereign's Capital, which is another name for God's money. And he felt convicted as he was building his company. How could he begin, as now an investor, build in faith-driven companies? So Sovereign's Capital exclusively invests in Christian-owned businesses. Mm-hmm. And as he was doing that, what he recognized is that that many people, including himself, were looking for encouragement in that journey of being faith-driven in their companies. And so we started a podcast. In 4 short years, we had 1.6 million downloads. We were hitting something that was really important. And he's like, well, now that all these individuals are reaching out to us, how do we begin to engage them with a greater amount of content? And Justin Foreman was a part of the new positioning of Right Now Media and really getting that off the ground, and really led Right Now Media in a lot of different ways, and brought his content experience into Faith Driven to be able to guide us in storytelling and gaining traction in that way. We started a small group study in the annual conference, and have just found, we have 2,400 volunteers, individuals that are part of churches that are leading this initiative at their church. So faith-driven entrepreneur is really how do we help some of the most dynamic, high-capacity leaders that exist in our congregations to be engaged. We want to be a resource partner to the church. We want to be able to provide those resources free of charge, so that ultimately those entrepreneurs can be engaged. That's our heart. And we're standing at a cultural moment right now. The cultural moment is that in society, individuals and people within society are looking towards entrepreneurs for leadership more than ever before. Name any of the big tech tycoons when it comes to Bates or Bezos or Musk. Regardless of our personal opinion about them or whatever we think about their political leanings, people within society are looking to them. We did a research study with Barna, and it shows that that 9 times more people trust entrepreneurs 9 times more than politicians. All right, that feels like a given to many of us. But also, people trust entrepreneurs 2 times more than pastors. And this shouldn't be like a negative to pastors, but what it shows to us that there's an emerging opportunity where entrepreneurs have a significant influence as they are seen as people that are respected, that get something done, that do what they say, and they can move things forward. And so if pastors see them as a collaborative partner, there's a lot of opportunity. The last stat in this that I'll share is that there are 73% of Americans, Christian and non, believe that the world's greatest problems can be solved through healthy partnerships between pastors and entrepreneurs. So there's also a society around us that is expectant that when entrepreneurs come with the heart of a pastor and they join forces together, really great things can happen in their community and their churches. So that's, to us, just is affirming, saying that for us to keep going. And our desire is to help set a table for pastors and entrepreneurs to come together, to have those conversations and see what God does in their local communities.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. And I know all of us, if there's tools available to us, then, man, we want to take advantage of them. And so cool you guys are doing that. How can people get a hold of you, or how can people dig in further to Faith Entrepreneur if they want to?
Yeah, definitely. So if the best way is to reach out to us by going to faithdrivenentrepreneur.org. That's one place that you can go. You can learn about our conference that is coming up. March 5th, 2026, we will have the Pastors and Entrepreneurs Conference. This is really an inspirational moment intended for pastors primarily, as a way to sit down for an hour and a half to 2 hours to watch some inspirational content about partnerships that are happening between pastors and entrepreneurs in churches around the world. and just signing up to watch that. You can find more information about that at faithdrivenentrepreneur.org. We have a podcast that's really intended for the entrepreneur, but it's really inspirational. And you can find that in any place that podcasts are listened to, or you can find it on our website at faithdrivenentrepreneur.org.
Cool. Very cool. Mark, thank you for the time. Thanks for what you guys are doing. Definitely something that I think every pastor knows is a need. Not always sure how to step into that arena. So thank you for giving us tools to do that. Appreciate it very much.
I appreciate the time today. Thanks, David.
Thank you for listening to the Advantage Podcast with David Ashcraft and for participating in our goal to strengthen and encourage pastors and their churches so more people are introduced to Jesus across Pennsylvania. If you found this helpful, feel free to pass it along. To find out more about the work of The Advantage, visit our website at theadvantage.org.